y'all, that was a whole lot of a very different experience from watching Florida State play in 2024. Oh, wow. Well, here we are for the Hot Takes podcast after Florida State takes visiting Alabama out to the woodshed, reverses the spread, wins 31-17 in the home opener, and the home opener for the renovated Doak Campbell, which, by the way, looked and sounded amazing on television and caused some serious problems for that Alabama offense at times. So, bravo, kudos to all of you who were at the game for really making a difference there. Yeah, well, styles make fights, y'all. Styles make fights. And Florida State absolutely took the fight to Alabama after that opening drive where Alabama was able to march downfield and sort of lean on them with that big offensive line and everything else. And from that point forward, Florida State dominated that football game. And you realize Alabama went up 7-0 and then got outscored 31-10 from that point forward. And you got to hand it to Mike Norvell and that crew, because they came in and they just did their work. And I got to say, I got a text message from one of my old roommates right after the game where he pointed out, he said, it is rare for the football gods to mete out justice this pure. And look, there will never be justice for that 2023 Florida State team. But I have to say, getting things back on track this way against the program that was the beneficiary of the travesty of the snub does feel like somewhat like the cosmos is getting rebalanced a little bit after that injustice. And, wow. And we talked about this in the previews for the season and everything else, that it was pretty clear that this was going to be a team that was just going to be a lot easier to root for. A team that's just going to be, that's going to fight and claw and kick. And they might not be the most talented team that Florida State's had, and they certainly aren't. But they're going to be a team that is going to be a very tough out for whomever they play, just because of the way that they're going to play the game. And they're going to play the game the right way, by and large. And you could see that in this game. By the way, speaking of people easy to root for, I have to cut in here to stop and thank my sponsors. As always, this podcast brought to you by EPR Creations, bringing you the best of website marketing and internet development for an affordable price. By Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida, a true Knoll who is one of the best in the business. Look, if you need to list a property in the greater Jacksonville area, if you needed, that guy outworks everybody. That guy's great at what he does. Let him know you heard about him from Unconquered with Doc Staples. Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina. PhD level analysis and work in the real estate market there. Realtor of the Year in the Triangle a year or so ago. Garage Makeover is the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida. If you want your garage to be the envy of your neighbors, give Nathan a call. Look, they do amazing work there. And then, of course, my newest advertising partner, who's been faithful through all of this, through a terrible season in 2024, Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky, giving you a boutique experience as a mortgage loan originator, making sure that you get exactly what you need and getting the best rates and the best of everything in that process, which can be really difficult for just about anybody. Specializing also in first-time home buyers, but if it's your fifth time, still worth going with. Let them know you heard about them from Unconquered with Doc Staples. Now, I also want to thank Bert Bertoldi at this point, because I'm getting a lot of kudos and such on social media and all for calling the shot and actually saying that I expected Florida State to win this game. But the truth of the matter is, I was going to call for this to be a very, very close game. I felt like Florida State, in terms of the styles make fights, was in a position where I really believed, analysis-wise, there were a lot of matchups that would go in Florida State's favor. They had a real chance to win this game. But I was not going to actually pick Florida State to win outright. Partly just because, the last thing you want to do when you're doing these sorts of things, and anybody who tells you otherwise and that it doesn't affect them or whatever is probably lying to you. But the last thing you want to do when you're doing these sorts of things is, have people kind of look at you and look at what you're predicting and all of that and being like, oh, well, he's just a homer. And the last thing I wanted was to pick Florida State in a game where essentially that would be the result. And look, I knew that there was a possibility that it wouldn't go the direction that I thought in terms of my analysis. So I was going to kind of try to take I was at least planning to take the sort of chicken route, in all honesty, and saying, well, I think Florida State's going to cover. I think it's going to be a game into the fourth quarter, but I just can't pick this team to win, given sort of where we've seen things of late and all of that to turn around that quickly in the opener. I was all prepared to take you right up to the threshold and say, I think they can win. Here's all the ways that I think the matchups favor Florida State in all sorts of ways, but I'm not going to pick them to win. It was just politically speaking, probably the safer play. And I knew it. But Bert Bertoldi, the long time, very helpful, more than any of you all know, supporter of this show, and former Florida State baseball player, excellent player in his day. He actually messaged me and said, "Look, you need to do it. You need to go all the way. You know you want to pick this game that way. Just do it. Just make the pick. Basically, have the balls to make the pick." And I thought about it, and danged if he wasn't right. It's like, I think they got a really good shot at winning this game. And if I'm just going to let the desire not to appear a homer interfere with my analysis, then what different? Like, how is that any different from being a homer? Just trying to keep it real too much. Well, thanks, Bert. You persuaded me to make the more courageous choice following the analysis, and I tip my cap to you, sir. Thank you for that. Because boy, that it did turn out a lot like what we kind of expected. So, yeah, I mean, this team plays with a lot of BDE, basically. At the end of the day, I mean, and all you have to do is look at how they backed up what they talked. I mean, you had some Joe Namath type stuff from Tommy Castellanos this summer, but Norvell, right after the Florida game in 2024, what did he say? Just like I told the team there in the locker room, this is getting fixed. It's going to be an immediate, fast fix. And people scoffed at that. People scoffed at whether or not you could flip things around that quickly. Well, I mean, they just dominated the number 8 team in the country, at least the preseason number 8 team. I'm actually not sure that this Alabama team is a top 10 team with that quarterback, at least. But we'll talk about that another time. But they came out and they handled business, and they showed that, yeah, you know what? Norvell was right when he said, we've identified what the problems were, what the problems are, and we are going to fix those problems. And we saw that in this game. And what was the refrain for me? I mean, I didn't record a bunch over the course of the summer. I mean, it just was not, it was not going to be fun for everybody to listen to me repeat myself over and over and over again over the summer to basically say the same things that I said when I did record, which was, look, this team is going to be better than a lot of people think because of a simple fact that if you can run the football and stop the run, you have a tendency to be pretty good, especially if you've got dudes in the secondary and you can stop the run and you have some dudes in the secondary. You can be really good just running the football and stopping the run. Don't turn the ball over, run the football, stop the run, be physical. You're going to win a lot of football games that way. And that's the identity of this football team. We saw it tonight. And really, I mean, if you want to talk about what the theme of this Hot Takes podcast is going to be, It is that Florida State has brought back bully ball to Tallahassee. Mike Norvell has always been a coach who believes in bully ball. And what we saw tonight, what we saw this afternoon in Tallahassee, was Florida State out-bullying an Alabama team that has been the bullies of college football for a long time now. And they went out and they, to quote Jesse Palmer, talking about Alabama, they got beat up in the trenches today. Florida State beat Alabama in the trenches today. A lot of people did not expect that. But we did see what we talked about in the preview podcast, the Alabama preview. This is by far the best starting five offensive line that Mike Norvell has had at Florida State. It's the first time that Norvell has had a set of five offensive linemen as starters where each of those guys is really an above average player, and each of them belongs at that position. They're not playing a guard at tackle or two guards at tackle. You don't have guys that are out there grossly overweight. Instead, what you're seeing here is you're seeing an offensive line that comes closer to, this is still not Mike Norvell's vision, but comes closer to the kind of group that he has wanted to field at Florida State from the beginning. And look, as far as I'm concerned, you can go ahead and extend Herb Hand's contract right now. and here's the thing. There's going to be younger offensive linemen who are going to watch what they just did and going to watch what they're going to be able to do over the course of the season if they're able to stay healthy. And that's the real concern with this team. There's some concern about depth. But if they can stay healthy and they can continue to run the football and stop the run this way, there's going to be a lot of sort of late, I want to be in that class players and some transfers that are going to want in when the transfer portal opens up for next year. This is all about essentially putting your best foot forward, putting, again, proof of concept. Anytime you're rebuilding, proof of concept is there. They did that back in 2021, 2022, and we saw the fruit of that in 2023. They're sort of on the second rebuild of the Norvell tenure now. And now you just had proof of concept. Like this was very similar to the win over LSU in 2022. Although this was more dominating than that. Where all of a sudden you've got, okay, look, we just need a few more pieces and come to Tallahassee and we're building a bully. Come down here and you're going to and get this work. So that's a big deal. But think about this. Mike Norvell said that in November of 2024. Tommy Castellanos famously in July of 2025, July 23rd of 2025, said he dreamed about playing Bama since he was a kid. And he said, they don't have Nick Saban to save him. I just don't see them stopping me. And a bunch of people said, oh, you just don't say that about Alabama. Like you're going to get those guys best shot now. Well, as I said then, like, I don't mind that. If I'm a coach, I don't mind a guy talking as long as he's putting in the work and he's going to back that up. I don't mind that because, look, if they need that to get them to play that much harder against you, then that's already a loss for them. That kind of stuff really doesn't make a difference after the first couple plays. But you did see Castellanos giving it to those guys a little bit and talking to them on the field once he got some first downs and so on, saying, I told y'all. And they gave it back to him a couple times when he was when he took some big shots. And he did a good job for the most part in this game of not taking too many big hits. He does a really good job of making himself small and getting down. It's not actually that hard for him to make himself small, but I digress. But at the end of the day, he went out and he backed up every word that he said. And his team, you could see this is his football team. And they have his personality in so many ways. You know, I've long been a believer that, you know, football teams usually take on the persona and the personality of their coach and their quarterback. Their head coach, to a lesser extent, their defensive coordinator, actually, and their quarterback. And this team, I think, really has done that. And then the final, you know, words to be spoken here, the kind of call out your shot words here that we saw that were relevant to this one was Mike Norvell on 4th and 1 from his own 34 against Bama, went up 7 midway through the fourth quarter. What did he say? Go for it. Okay. And what did they do? They bullied Alabama on the right side of the offensive line and at center with a former Alabama running back running over and trucking the Alabama defender that met him in the hole. And they got, 3 yards on that play? That was a statement. That was Sam Cassell drilling a 3 and then running down the field, demonstrating what kind of man he is. That is, you really have to believe in your team, and you have to believe in your offensive line to be able to do that. This is a completely different, wipe 2024 from your memory. It is a distant memory now. These guys, the starters on offense don't remember it because they weren't here. It's different. It's a different team. And, a bunch of people are going to be pretty happy about this. I'm just going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say there are many future Florida State students who will be born about 9 months from tonight. Over the next couple days, there will be many future Florida State students who will be born about 9 months from now. So let's get to it in terms of talking about some of the other stuff in terms of this game. We'll start on the offensive side. Gus Malzahn was in his bag tonight. And this is exactly what we talked about in the preview podcast. Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn are a very dangerous combination as in terms of big game planning as offensive coaches. And for openers especially, and for an opener where nobody really knew what they were going to look like. Nobody knew kind of how this was going to gel. Nobody knew what this was going to look like at all. You hadn't seen a spring game. Nobody was in fall practice to report specific things. So, you got a blank slate, and that makes it that much harder to deal with Malzahn. And Malzahn broke out some of the vintage Malzahn stuff. We talked about look for, at some point, some sort of misdirection with a wheel on the other side that's going to go for a big play. And sure enough, there they got it. Jalen Lucas, the gadget player that Malzahn absolutely loves having in his offense and would have been huge in the 2024 offense, actually. Being able to take off for, 60-plus yards on that one. And again, it was the big plays in this game that made all the difference. This was a game that, I say Florida State bullied Alabama, but you look at these numbers and really this game came down to big plays and situations. Jimbo Fisher used to say it's all about situations. You can have a team that outplays the other team for the bulk of 4 quarters, but one team outplays the other in key situations and they win the game. And Florida State outplayed Alabama in the key situations all night. 3rd down conversions. Alabama was 6 of 17 on 3rd down conversions. Florida State was 5 of 12, but that is a pretty big difference in terms of stops. And in terms of 4th downs on that as well, what did Florida State do? They went for it on 4th down multiple times, and they got them. Alabama did not. Huge deal. Huge deal. So Malzahn was in his bag. Boy, I tell you what, Mekhi Danzy, welcome to the show. That guy's pretty fast. Maybe he should try running track when it's not football season. I bet you Gus Malzahn never thought he would have another player close to the speed of Schwartz, who he had at Auburn, who was, a low 10-1 area sprinter. And Malzahn put him to work on those reverses and all of that. And he did some things on those that, just Olympic, close to Olympic speed, world-class speed on a football field does. And Danzy is the perfect toy for Malzahn's toolkit. He is the perfect tool for Malzahn's toolkit to be able to break out in key moments. And I can guarantee you that every team on Florida State's schedule from here is going to be keeping in mind where that guy is lined up at any time. Just because, and it's not even about him running downfield. It's about all the misdirection stuff. And that just forces you to commit an extra guy or two to the backside. And then that means you've got more numbers to the front side. And then you can do things with your quarterback run game and all of that. It's almost like adding a 12th man to your running game. It's a huge, huge deal. And then, of course, Castellanos played his role. He did exactly what you would ask him to do in this game. He played within himself. No touchdowns, no interceptions. It does not matter. 9 of 14 for 152 yards, a bunch of key conversions. Really, they only needed him to throw when they needed key conversions. And they had, 2 first downs on third down by passing. They had some other big plays in the passing game on, key downs. That was all they needed from him in the passing game. But he also had 16 carries for 78 yards, averaging 4.9 yards per carry. And that was huge. That's the ball game. And only 28 yards given up on sacks, 3 sacks. And those were all essentially good sacks. There are bad sacks and good sacks. Those were good sacks where he got, he controlled the ball. He recognized, look, there's nothing here. Just take the loss. Don't take too big of a loss. Get down, live to see another play. He managed this football game like a champion. And when the time came to make a big play, to get a first down with his legs, to get a first down with his arm, that guy kept delivering. There were multiple cases where he was trapped in the backfield or where they called something in the quarterback run game and he was able to make a play with his legs where it looked like he was penned in, wasn't going to get there, and just flat out effort and burst. That guy's got great burst. Suddenly, all of a sudden, Florida State's got a first down. And I can guarantee you, Kane Womack and that Alabama defensive staff were pulling their hair out because of some of the plays that he made and some of the things that he was able to do where, look, on paper, that's a win for the defense, but that guy's better than your guy. A lot of Jordan Travis-ish stuff. A little different in style. He's going to design run a little bit more, all of that. But it's the Jordan Travis effect that we saw from Castellanos tonight. And by the way, tonight's win means that Castellanos now has more wins as a starter in Doak Campbell at quarterback than against an FBS opponent than the whole 2024 team. They had 2 wins, one of which was against an FCS team in 2022 or in 2024. And he went out there and just did it. Just had his second one because he had one in 2024. Give him credit. Look, he talked the talk and he walked the walk. And what did we talk about in the preview? They were going to have to just run the football. I said, look, Gus will run it 60 times if he can. And all of Bama's losses last year came from teams that ran it over 40 times, and 3 of the 4, the teams ran it over 50. Florida State had 49 carries for 230 yards, 4.7 yards per carry, and only gave up 3 tackles for loss on the night. They had 49 carries and 3 tackles for loss. That is a night and day difference. Not just from 2024, but from 2023, 2022, where Florida State was a boom and bust running game. That was something that we had criticized some on this podcast, is that there was too much leakage at times where they basically allowed too many tackles for loss. They got huge plays because they had a stud running back in Benson, but they were not consistent in terms of being able to just churn away on the ground, because they just gave up too much leakage on the offensive line. With Herb Hand in town and Malzahn and Norvell working closely together to get that offense run, that's completely changed. And if this team continues with that, where they're only giving up, 1 or 2 or 3 tackles for loss per game, it's going to be a very hard team to beat this year. All of a sudden, you beat Alabama in the opener. You can't tell me that this team cannot beat Miami of Florida, or Ohio, actually, for that matter. You can't tell me that this team can't compete with Florida. I think Clemson's really, really good. So I still think Clemson should be favored over this team. But what's the ceiling for this team? If they can run the football and stop the run like this, this is what we talked about in the season preview. The ceiling for this team is probably 10-2 or even 11-1. Because you stop the run, you run the football, and you do that with consistency, and you've got a good enough secondary where when you're stopping the run, you're not just giving up free runners all the time. You can be really good. Now, I also think that this game completely changed. The whole tenor of this game changed on Squirrel White's 40-yard diving catch. That was the play, as far as I'm concerned, that was the play that marked the change for Florida State. That was the transition play where it was all of a sudden, okay, game on. And you could see after that catch, and remember, Bama came out in that opening drive and mostly imposed their will. They had to work to score that touchdown on that opening drive, but they did impose their will and score a touchdown on that opening drive. They had Florida State down to a third down, and all of a sudden, Florida State goes for a 40-yard diving catch. And how many catches like that last year did Florida State just drop, where they had the play to be made, it was there, and they just didn't make the play? How many times did they make any of those last year? I think they might have had one, and it was probably not in a game where it really mattered by that point. He went and he made that diving catch after running right by Bama's corner. And after that catch and the immediately subsequent touchdown, to me, it seemed like the entire team and actually the entire stadium breathed a sigh of relief, and you could see the belief suddenly there. And the defense, when they went out the next drive, and you would expect the defense to be tired after that prior drive, they went out and they looked rejuvenated. They looked like they believed all of a sudden, like, look, we can beat these guys. So give Squirrel White, he had one catch tonight, but that catch was as meaningful and as influential as any play in this game. Squirrel White went out and absolutely changed this game by running by a guy, making a great catch, and putting them in that position. So then the defense came out, went and imposed their will on the next drive. And then after that, it was Danzy's touchdown that really blew the whole thing open. So they had started to believe by the time you had Castellanos cross the goal line after that Squirrel White catch. They believed at that point. When Danzy broke that tackle and took off and scored, that team not only believed, they knew. You could see them like, okay, yep, we got this. We're going to do this. And that's the thing. You got to just get the snowball rolling a little bit sometimes. And this is one of the reasons why coaching is so frustrating at times, is there's so much momentum involved. And a lot of people say, oh, momentum's a fake thing or whatever. Bull. I've coached. I've played. And there's times where it's like, look, if we could just make one good play here, then all of a sudden you have enough belief or enough knowledge that it's going to happen. If you just make one putt, like all of a sudden, like, okay, now I know I can make these putts. You have to do it. And from that point forward, it was really about keeping the foot down and making sure not to tighten up, not to make mistakes that would let Bama back into it, and to keep playing aggressive. And they kept the foot down. They played aggressive the whole time. Malzahn as a play caller really knows one speed, and that's attack. And that's what they did. Now, that was a bad muffed punt. They're going to need to figure out the punt return situation on that. It looked to me like he was getting ready to go catch it, and he stopped because of the gunner being right there. And that's one where you need to run through the gunner. Draw the penalty, run through the gunner, and, if you get hit, fine. But he wanted to pull away from that, and it was too late. They need to figure that out. They need to fix that. But the defense, again, they responded after that, and they got to stop again. Now, that was largely thanks to Simpson missing an easy throw, which he did multiple times. But again, that showed that team, something bad happened, and they responded. and they had each other's back, and they not only believed, but they knew that they could do that. That's huge. That's a complete culture shift. And again, I want to reinforce this. Florida State's offensive line went out and pounded Alabama up front. 4.7 yards per carry is nothing to sneeze at. And to do that against a Bama front that has a bunch of 5-stars up there, that's something. Now, I do want to say, Palmer and Tessitore were wrong about Lucas running out of bounds. That was not a mistake. It was pre-2-minute warning, which means that the clock is going to continue to run. So you can go out of bounds there. That was fine. Now, I would have liked to have seen him dive for the first down, sure. But going out of bounds is actually not a problem there. Alabama had to waste their last time out anyway because the clock continues to run until the 2-minute warning. It only starts stopping if you're in bounds. It only starts stopping if you run out of bounds after the 2-minute warning. So that was a mistake by them, not by Lucas in terms of running out of bounds. So, I mean, look, this was a huge, huge deal in terms of what they did offensively. A completely different offensive look, running basically the same kind of stuff that Mike Norvell has run his whole career, but it looked very different from what they had become the last couple years under Alex Atkins, where they'd really gotten very turgid. They weren't using motion. They were, sort of stuck in the same formations. It was lazy, basically. What you saw tonight was just constant movement, constant motion, constant eye candy. This was vintage Malzahn. And this is what I would expect in all of the big games for the remainder of the season. This is what Miami of Florida is going to face in a month. And now you've got essentially a preseason and then Virginia. You get out of this month at 4-0, whew, boy, that really changes expectations, doesn't it? Wow. All right. So let's go ahead and move to the defensive side of the ball. So on the defensive side, I do think there's a lot of room still left to improve defensively. There just is. Defensively, I think Tony White, thrilled that they fought and clawed the way that they did, but there were some communication things. There were some things in terms of coverage that they've got to get cleaned up. Back end, they're still a work in progress. It was predictable basically when Bama ran a dagger route or a sail concept or, some of those type of things. It was predictable that the guy was just coming wide open. And Simpson just missed some of those, and in others, he put it out there and it was a catch, but it was not something that they could really do much with. But it was enough. And the thing that they did do is when they did arrive, they hit. And we heard them talk about this in the lead up to the game. They talked about the importance of hitting Bama's wide receivers and making them really hear footsteps. And we really saw that pay off with Ryan Williams. Ryan Williams wanted nothing to do with that secondary by the end of the game. He had multiple drops where they were footstep drops. He just didn't want anything to do with getting hit after that first drive or two. They went out and they bullied him and they intimidated Ryan Williams. Just flat out intimidated him. But like I said, there's still some work to do in terms of communication, in terms of allowing certain guys to be open too often, too much. And I think some of the teams that you're going to face down the line they're going to be able to take advantage of that more than what Alabama was tonight. So, you think about Beck with Miami, Florida, he's probably going to be able to make those throws and hurt you if you leave that much space for him. I think that's pretty straightforward. And, honestly, I think Miami's offensive line is going to be better than what you saw from Alabama tonight. This was supposed to be one of the 5 best offensive lines in the country. I'm sorry, but that left tackle keeps them from being one of the top 5 offensive lines in the country, because whoever Florida State lined up over there, if Alabama did not chip with an H-back or a running back or somebody coming by to essentially help that right tackle, and they did it most of the night, about 80% of their pass plays, they did that. If they didn't have somebody to help him, he got beat like a drum. Florida State was able to beat him relentlessly. And by the way, shout out to Mandrell Desir for just a complete blow-by of the right guard on that first sack, which he didn't get the sack, but he caused the sack That guy was a find in the 2025 recruiting class. He's already a hit. That guy's already a player, and his brother's not far behind. He played. He didn't have quite as many splash type plays, but he played. And by my count, there were somewhere around 12 defensive linemen who played in this game. They rotated heavily up front in this game, and it really paid off late because Alabama wanted to wear them down, and ultimately it was Alabama's offensive line that wore down. That right tackle was puking in a trash can at one point. They wore that Alabama team down. Now, by the way, in terms of wearing Bama down on that, I don't think this Alabama team is in the kind of physical condition that we've seen certain Alabama teams in the past. I thought they were a little soft on that front compared to what I've seen. And I was honestly kind of shocked by the lack of strain that I saw from some of those guys on defense at times. Now, there were times where you could see him turn the dial a little bit and go, okay, that looks more like Alabama. But there were other times where it just did not look like they were playing all out, and kind of looked a little bit like Florida State at times from last year. And you compared that to Florida State defensively, and this is where there's still a bunch of room to improve. And they got helped by Ty Simpson missing key throws, and his numbers were fine, but situations really matter. And he crapped the bed on several occasions that would potentially have led to points for Alabama. I don't think he's going to finish the year as their starter, for what it's worth. And I think you are going to hear SEC homers talking after midseason or so about how FSU didn't beat this Bama. They didn't beat Bama at their best because they're different with a new quarterback or whatever. And they might be right by that point. But you know what? Florida State still beat the Bama they faced. And that's what matters. And the bottom line here is, even though there's lots of room to improve and all of that, what we saw was a Florida State defense like we all remember in terms of the culture of the defense. This was a bunch of tough SOBs playing hard, playing like maniacs, and getting a bunch of hats to the ball with a vengeance on every play. You didn't see guys loafing out there. You saw maybe two or three loafs over the course of the game. I can think of a couple where it was like, okay, he's going to get talked to in film session a little bit for that effort tackling in a couple cases. But then those guys came back and did it later. But this has always been Florida State's defensive identity. And when they've tried to go away from this identity, it really hasn't worked in Tallahassee. But the basic identity, you got a bunch of Florida kids, you got a bunch of Florida players and guys who like that kind of culture. And that culture is, if you're going to get beat, make them earn it and make them feel it for days after they play you. Look, they may beat us, but they're not going to out-hit us. They may beat us, but they're not going to play harder than us. If they're going to beat us, they're going to have to beat us with some big plays and some skill that, maybe is just more than what we got. That's always been the thing. I mean, Mickey Andrews' old take on this was, if they can beat my corners one-on-one, then you tip your cap. But they ain't running it down my throat, and they're not out hitting my team. And that's what this team looked like. So, hand it to White for. Now I want to do stickers with his image. I have an idea that might get me canceled for this, but anyway, we'll see. And actually, there's already been more stickers are selling in the Unconquered Shop as a result of this win. It was kind of a slow trickle in recent months, really the last year. All of a sudden, people want back in, so that's good to see. There's some passion once again, but. And by the way, one other thing that Florida State absolutely has to fix is James Williams has to finish sacks and finish tackles when he has the opportunity. They got to get that fixed. How many times did he have opportunities for sacks and then come up empty? At least 3 or 4. But this has always been the DNA of this program, and it's what we saw. Out hit them, outwork them, out physical the team that you're playing against, and that's what they did. Now, in terms of other things, in terms of other notes, trying to go through here and think through, they had, pretty clean game in terms of turnovers and everything else. There weren't really many opportunities to get hands on the football from either side. You had the one take with Joseph, who might have been able to get a hand on something, but he was already closing in to try to make a tackle. And it looked like he got dinged up pretty good coming up to tackle a big back there, threw his shoulder into it. You hope the shoulder's fine. Probably got his bell rung, actually, from what it looked like. But he's got some time he can rest. So that's a big deal. But yeah, I think this is now going to give them an opportunity to go and take a look at that tape and figure out who they have in different spots, who they can really trust. And it looks like it's a lot of people. Looks like they've got a lot to work with there. This is going to be a fun season. Don't expect this team to go undefeated. I mean, that would be unfair for this team. But what you can expect is a team that's going to compete and play hard every game. They're going to run the football. They're going to find ways to run the football and stop the run against almost everybody they play. And they're going to be a tough out for everyone. And I mean, that includes that Clemson team that I think is really, really good. So, yeah, if you have to think, Mike Norvell, if I'm Mike Norvell, I'm walking into the coach's office, maybe even the locker room immediately after the game, and I'm ready to do my full Ace Ventura. I have exorcised the demons. This place is clean. Because, boy, you talk about flipping things. Enjoy it, guys. Enjoy it, everybody who's stuck around after a really awful 2024, where watching these games was more or less like getting a root canal. This was a whole lot more fun. I mean, I don't think it was fun for opponents to watch Florida State play last year, even when they were beating them, for the most part. It was just bad football. This was a lot more fun to watch, a lot better quality of product on the field, a lot more effort. So enjoy that. Enjoy the process of seeing that more future Florida State students and such are going to be potentially on the way. This has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. I'm Doc Staples, bringing you your Hot Takes podcast after Florida State bullies Alabama 34-17. Thanks for listening. If you've been enjoying this podcast, please leave a 5-star rating over at Apple Podcasts and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Post and repost episodes on social media and tell a friend. And if you haven't left a review in a while, do it again. It really does help the visibility of the podcast. Before we go, I'd also like to thank my advertising partners once more. That's EPR Creations, Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida, Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina, Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida, and Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. You can also stop by the Unconquered Shop at unconqueredpodcast.com, where you can buy stickers, pins, magnets, t-shirts, and other swag. I am especially grateful for those of you at the Dynasty level. That is Brian Leininger, Dave Blair, Jack Horton, Jonathan Kennedy, Lee Caswell, Travis Smith, and Tyler Kashishki. You all are far more generous than I deserve. Thanks to you all. This has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. I'm your host, Jason Staples. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support. I made this.